What I think the image is, it's not a thing put in humanity. It's not an attribute given to humanity. Think of it as a verb. It's a status. Part of the debate over what the image of God is concerns, again, this phrase, let us make man in our image after our likenesses. Now, as in English, we're dealing with a preposition here. Prepositions in Hebrew are used to denote different ideas. I'm going to suggest to you that the key to this, believe it or not, is how you take the preposition in. And this is an actual point of Hebrew grammar that I'm going to show you, so I'm not making it up. But I think that's the key. Let's talk about how we do this in English. If I say, put the dishes in the sink, what am I denoting? What's the meaning? Location. Put the dishes in the sink. The preposition there tells me location. If I say that something is written in pencil, what do I mean? Same preposition. Certainly isn't location. Source or instrumentality. I didn't adjust my fonts here, my pitch size. See, there you go. He broke the vase in pieces. Denotes what? Result. Here's what to say in reply. Denotes purpose or process. I work in accounting. Means what? If I say I work in accounting, what am I saying?
You may be referring to different things. One would be the type of work you do. Mm-hmm. One other might be the location. Mm-hmm. I work in accounting.
Yes, it could. It could be the location. And the second one is the more important alternative, the type of work. Basically, if I said I worked in education or I work in medicine, it's function or capacity. That's my job. It's what I do. It's a verb. Okay? Here's my point. I think we should understand Genesis 1, 26 and 27 as meaning that humankind was created to function in the capacity of God. Let us make humankind as our image. All of this points to viewing the image in a functional sense. We are created to image God, to be Him as though He were here. Okay, we are His representatives. It's a status given to us. It's a function that we need to fulfill. I think if we take that tack, we go to the New Testament, we get some interesting results, or at least we get some interesting cross-fertilization of ideas. Paul says, we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, for this comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. As we image God, we become more like Him. We are transformed from what we are into what we should be, what His intention is. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Elsewhere, we have this idea of Christ as the, quote, express image. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He's the best imager that there ever was. He is the imager par excellence. He is the template for our own imaging. He is what we ought to be. an imager of God. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, to be more like him, conformed to be like him, to become him, not in an ontological sense, but in a functional, in a works sense, in a sanctification sense. Be conformed to the image of his Son. I'm going to stop there and talk. I just want to say a few more things about this. I think the advantage to this particular view, if I can summarize it, is every person, whether through the providence of God, the sovereignty of God, again, it gets into theodicy, why is there evil? But every human being is born an imager of God. He is born, she is born with that status. It can never be taken away. It is not bestowed incrementally. It is not obtained in stages. It just is. Okay, if you are human, you are an imager of God. You are God's representative on this planet, and nothing else is. This is his domain. It's our domain because he gave it to us to be shepherd kings over it. We are him as though he were physically here. Now, in a fallen world, again, under the sovereignty of God, some human beings will never get to do that. They will never get to live out their own role as imagers of God. Okay, they could die prematurely in the womb, they could be aborted, they could be born severely retarded, they will not be able to use the faculties that God has given in principle to humanity, the way that we are biologically made by him. Some human beings never get to do that. But that doesn't diminish the fact that they are and were imagers, period. So, whatever happens to be conceived at the moment of conception in the womb, it can only be human, genetically. If it's multiplying cells, it's alive, scientifically, and theologically, it is an imager. It just is. It doesn't have to develop to the point of being an imager of God. It just is. And I think we are on more of a solid foundation with our ethics if we take that view as opposed to any other view that links it to an organ or chronology. We're able to. Sometimes I run through that and I leave people about halfway through. We are like the Creator in terms of we're the only thing in the created realm that is like him in terms of being a reflection. We have communicable attributes of his that it enables us to be him in his absence. And we have those things. Yeah, well, I'm not denying omnipresence, but just, in other words, God creates the earth and says, hey, I want you guys to run it. I think there's obviously more to it than that. But, we are, let's throw out some terms, understudies. We are, again, shepherd kings. We are ambassadors. We're representatives. We're all these things by virtue of the fact that we're human. Now, it's interesting, after the fall, that isn't lost because of Genesis 5:1. It's still, the language is still there. And it becomes an issue in Genesis 9:6. So it's not like the image either ends or starts with the fall. It's pre-fall, and it continues on. And it's something that is shared by humanity broadly and exclusively.
Kind of like a Romans
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you are capable of imaging God because you're human. Because you're human. If you are allowed to live, and the things given to you by the Creator, again, biology, he created us to reproduce our own kind. Those things are intact. They are stilted. Okay, they're truncated. Okay, in some way, we could surely image God better if we weren't fallen, but because we have statements about the image after the fall that don't denigrate the status, they don't make it lesser than what it was, then to me it stands to reason that we are still considered imagers. We certainly are because, in light of Genesis 9:6, we're still God's effigy, so to speak.
Okay. So things that we might consider our higher nature, music and...
I think all of those things, anything that is part of what we are, is intended by God to be used for His glory. And part of that is, let's say you're a scientist. Part of your mission is to think God's thoughts after Him, to find out what makes the universe tick. Okay, there's discovery there, and you're using that, to glorify God and to better the lives of other imagers. I mean, business. I mean, anything really. You can put almost any area in here, and we're getting into the verse 27, the whole idea of the dominion mandate. Okay, what humanity is tasked to do. Subdue the earth. It's really yes, it's control, but it's not rape and pillage the earth. Okay.
Like a royal capacity.
Right. You are a steward and a king all rolled up into one. And it's your job to maintain what God has made and to use the communicable attribute of God in terms of creatorship. We have creative power. We have creative ability, not to say exist and it exists, but we can build things. We can make things. We can imagine things. Right. There are things that humanity does that God, of course, could do and would do a whole lot better. But God says, run to it. Take care of it. Go find out how wonderful it is. It's all part of stewarding, what He's done in all these areas. I don't know how many of you come from a Reformed Christian context, but in the Reformed circles, this is called the cultural mandate, or the idea that there's no division between secular and sacred. Okay, there is no distinction there. There's no being in the ministry is not superior to being anything else, because they're all just imaging tasks. God views them all equally. They're equally important. They're equally worthwhile. It's the work ethic, what we call the Protestant work ethic. Work has value. It has intrinsic value. And it's all predicated on Genesis 1:26 and 27, when theologians talk about it anyway. Yes, sir.